Hi guys, this is Nathan again, or Martial Law as I'm known on Telegram, but this is my third video about my website EmpowerYourLife.dev. Don't worry about the alternative address you can see there in the top left hand corner. They all take you to the webpage you can currently see on the screen, EmpowerYourLife.dev. This video continues on with the Law-5 website, which you can access by clicking on this button here at the top which says learn the rules of the system, or the button below which says view law website, or you can click on the image of the city as sunset in the middle of them both, and they all take you to this website here which you can see on the screen right now about how the worldwide system works. And it is a commercial system, meaning it deals with commerce, profit and monetization. Today we'll be going through the first page or home page of this site. By the way, remember to hit like, subscribe and the notification bell so you can get notified of all future videos. And going back, you'll notice it says click the image below and empower your status, separate laws from regulations, and that's what I'll be doing on this site, where as you can see at the top it says empower yourself through law, and in the middle, law, your path to freedom. And if we scroll down, if you're new to this, by the way, and haven't watched my previous video, I do suggest you watch that before watching this one. Otherwise, let's continue on, starting off where it says introduction. It says, first of all, welcome. Secondly, I would like to say that this website has nothing to do with conspiracy theories, because a theory by its definition means something unproven. What is presented here is simply knowledge for the purposes of empowerment, as application of knowledge is power. Thirdly, nothing on this site is legal advice, so we'll just keep things lawful here, okay? As a side note, you might be wondering why I chose the website name Law-5. Well, that is because of the 5 main law forms which I describe in my notes. See my contact page to receive those. Yeah, if we go up, there's an index at the top of each page, and if you click on contact, that'll take you here. Yeah, this is the contact page, and also has a form. If we scroll down a bit, where it says free introductory course, get the information from this website sent to you weekly, broken down into manageable bite-sized portions when you subscribe below. So you can subscribe to my newsletter there, and videos will be included like the one you're listening to now. So going back to where we were, it says things presented here may sometimes include my own comments and theories, but both of those are coming from tried and tested methods and experiences in the real world when dealing with lawful processes and procedures from my own study of history. Fourthly, as a finishing comment to this introduction to my website, I will say now that although you won't find any conspiracy theories here, conspiracies do exist. If you question that statement, then you obviously haven't seen the following films which I suggest you watch. And by the way, I only suggest you watch them for that purpose. If you don't need convincing that conspiracies exist, then I only recommend you watch number 5, which is The Big Short, as you can see there, starring Christian Bale. And because it has important knowledge about the subject of this website, which is how the system operates. That doesn't mean that the other films aren't good, informative films worth watching though, just that they have negative connotations, so can put a downer on our mood if we watch them all at once. So better not to watch them all in one go, is all I say. There's a documentary I also recommend, which I mentioned in the last video, called Secret City, a film about the city of London, which I also suggest people watch too. And anyway, let's continue on. Number one, if you want proof that conspiracies do exist, number one film off the top of my head I thought of was JFK starring Kevin Costner. Number two was Erin Brockovich with Julia Roberts. Number three, Kill the Messenger with Jeremy Renner. Number four, Dark Waters starring Mark Ruffalo. Number five, The Big Short starring Christian Bale. Number six, Malcolm X with Denzel Washington. Number seven, Selma starring David Oyelowo and Tim Roth. Number eight, Official Secrets starring Keira Knightley. All of these mainstream movies are true stories, and only a few that I can think of just off the top of my head. And then we go to preliminaries. Did you know that no matter what country you are in, if you are using a Latin-based language, a name in all capital letters denotes a corporation, a dead entity with no rights, corpse for short, from Latin corpus, body, where we also get the word corpse from, another dead entity with no rights. That's why the style of writing with all capital letters is called mortmain, dead hand, just like the style of writing used for tombstones. Oh, have you ever noticed that whenever you get a bill or are issued with ID, your name is always in capital letters and that you're always asked to fill out forms in block capitals? Do you think this is coincidence? Well, this might explain a little about the reason why, because a corporation was created with a name very similar to yours, just in all caps. And in fact, we are made to assume it is ours. Well, technically it is ours, our person, our persona, a mask we use when we are acting in personam. This is how those at the top of the legal society have fooled us for years. Did you know that a corporation can't charge a man or woman money? That's why they charge the money to the corporation created in your name, which you are responsible for. Did you think they were charging you? Well, they're not, although you are in charge of that corporation, so there's no one else to write a bill to. By the way, as a very important side note, I recommend people don't do anything without first understanding what they're doing first. In other words, understanding completely how something works first. So don't start refusing to pay debts now that you've found this piece of information, as there's a proper and honourable way to go about this, one which won't get you into trouble and which we'll go into a bit more later on the following pages. So continuing on, we come back up the page to the statute of what's her name, Themis, I forget. Legalese, by the way, Lady Justice, you'll notice that she's blindfolded. I won't go into that though. Let's continue where it says legalese. The Law Society also has its own language called legalese. You can find many different law dictionaries, such as Bouvier's, where you can look up the meaning of words. For instance, person has a few meanings, one of which is corporation, another meaning is body. Don't believe me? Go look it up, although in fact I've saved you the trouble, as you'll see in a minute when you carry on reading. And then tell me you still want to be known as a person. Why do you think in legal documents they invented the term persons to refer to people rather than using the proper word people? Hint, they're not talking about people, but to corporations. In fact, let's go down to the definition of person now. It says here is the definition of person from Stroud's English Dictionary, 2nd edition, 1903. Person. Prima facie, the word person in a public statute includes a corporation as well as a natural person, per Selborne, Pharmaceutical Society v London and Provincial Supply, and that's the rest of the case number. And then we continue with the quote. The word person may very well include a natural person, in brackets a human being, and an artificial person, in brackets a corporation. I think that is an act of parliament unless there be something to the contrary. Probably I would not like to pledge myself to that. It ought to be held to include both. And then it continues later on. Person is defined as to include a corporation. So that's from Stroud's, that's the end of the quote, but from Stroud's Judicial English Dictionary 2nd edition, and can be found on page 1463. But if we go back, you'll notice here it says human being, but if we look up human in a particular edition of Black's Law Dictionary, we find the meaning of human is monster. And if we look at the word, it's composed of hue, the prefix, and man, the suffix. Hue meaning color, so color of man, hue of man, which is why I'd rather just use the term man, because it reminds me of the term color of law, which is like being asked if you want an orange, but instead of the fruit being given, you're given the color orange, if that makes sense to you. Or even if not, my point is I would only ever identify as a man, because man or woman can't be restricted in legislation, statutes, acts, bylaws, or whatever. Whereas all these other titles which they want us to identify with can. That's why you'll never find man, woman, nor people listed in their legislation which seek to restrict us or diminish our rights. Anyway, let's continue. And as you can see, t-shirts are also available to buy if you want to make people aware without even opening your mouth. From T-Mill, that link below the t-shirt. But continuing on, it says here is the definition of person from Black's Law Dictionary, this time revised 6th edition 1856. I quote, person. This word is applied to men, women and children who are called natural persons. In law, man and person are not exactly synonymous terms. Any human being is a man, whether he be a member of society or not, whatever may be the rank he holds, or whatever may be his age, sex, and I'm not sure what that means. Can't think. A person is a man considered according to the rank he holds in society, with all rights to which the place he holds entitles him, and the duties which it imposes. One booth in, I guess that's a book quote or a case law quote. It is also used to denote a corporation, which is an artificial person. And then there's another case number or book number to end the quote. And then I continue. Did you also know that during the Great Fire of London in 1666, an act was passed declaring everybody dead until they come forward to prove that they are still alive? The only thing is that they conveniently forgot to tell people about it, and according to Admiralty law, if someone is missing for 7 years, they become dead beyond reasonable doubt. This act was called the Sestwick V Act. You can easily look it up online. Also, this wasn't just for the people who could have been killed during the fire. It now applies to everyone from birth, alternative spelling in brackets, birth, B-E-R-T-H. Yes, that's right, because babies are birthed from the birth canal of their mother's waters, and some are even christened too, just like ships are when they are birthed into the water after they're finished being made and are registered as a new vessel. So They're basically applying Admiralty law to newborns, and after 7 years of being lost at sea because no one came to the custodian of records to prove life, they're presumed dead. You're probably thinking this is crazy, but that's the world of legal fictions for you. Anything to make the bankers richer by keeping us the people forever paying a perpetual national debt, which I might add has gotten so high that it now has an interest rate of more than 5,000 per second, as I went into in detail in the previous video. Now do you see why there are cutbacks and price increases each year? If you're still here reading and taking this in, and if you don't already know any of this, then congratulations, and as Morpheus said to Neo in the film The Matrix, welcome to the real world. Or, welcome to the world of legal fiction at least. Why do you think they are called Acts of Parliament? Why do you have a person with which to act in personam with? And why do police, short for policy enforcement officers, all wear costumes? All the world is a stage, according to William Shakespeare, who, by the way, wrote plays on every different type of court case in law, with which law students can use to practice. Coincidence, perhaps? Is it also a coincidence that the all-capitalized style of writing in Roman is called capitis diminutio maxima, meaning a maximum loss of rights, and that capitis diminutio means diminished capacity? And there's another t-shirt there. Is it also coincidence that Adolf Hitler wore a Roman uniform, used the Roman salute, the Heil Hitler, and carried Roman insignia, for instance the swastika, the Iron Cross, the eagle, etc., etc.? Below is a video on that for those who are interested. The Holy Roman Empire today. And yeah, if you're into history, it does help to watch informative videos like that one, even if you're not. If you're into law, it helps. Here's Barack Obama and Stalin, or is it Lenin, one of the two, on the left. And they're using, well, Barack's copying his imagery. Maybe it's a coincidence. George Bush also copied Hitler's methods when he was rallying, by the way, for doing his own speeches, like wearing army uniform and having a big picture of himself behind him, etc., just like Hitler. Alex Jones did a video on that probably 15 or 20 years ago now, if you want to look him up. Continuing on, world bankruptcy. Now we come to the bankruptcy, but before we get there, we'll start with the Battle of Waterloo in 1815, when the Duke of Wellington defeated Napoleon 4 years after England declared war on America in 1811, when the renewal of the charter of the First Bank of the United States, a privately owned bank, was defeated by a single vote in Congress. Nathan Rothschild was a rich man, and he was also always the first to receive news, and due to his private courage, he received news of Napoleon's defeat 2 days before anyone else. He slyly used this information to his advantage. At the London Stock Exchange, instead of buying English bonds in brackets gilts, he sold those he had, causing the traders who saw this to assume Napoleon had won the war and to immediately sell their bonds too. This caused the gilt price to drop dramatically. Rothschild, who was already very rich, was then able to purchase many of these gilts at a very low price, making him excessively rich by the time anyone noticed. The King of England at the time, George III, was heavily indebted, including interest accruing to Nathan Rothschild, who had financed his wars and thus was also in Nathan's pocket. Here is a quote from Nathan Rothschild. "I care not what puppet is placed on the throne of England to rule the empire. The man who controls Britain's money supply controls the British Empire, and I control the money supply." And then we have a meme. Says, in 1815, Nathan Rothschild virtually bought the Bank of England. After the Battle of Waterloo, Nathan's own courier was the first to reach England, bringing news that Wellington had won the battle and thus the war. Armed with this critical information, Nathan began selling up his British war bonds, fooling other traders into believing Napoleon had won instead. Panicked, those traders quickly began selling off their own near worthless bonds, at which point Nathan ordered his workers to buy up as many of those bonds as they could. Once the news reached London that Wellington had won, Nathan's newly acquired bonds gained more value than they had before the entire war. The ownership of such high-value bonds meant that the Rothschilds literally owned the Bank of England. From that moment onwards, the interests of the British Crown and the Rothschilds became so entwined that the Rothschilds were given titles of nobility. Through intermarriage, the Rothschilds became royalty. There's a little portrait of Nathan Rothschild, born in Frankfurt, 1777 to 1836. And the Federal Reserve Bank, or the Fed, is the illegally, unconstitutionally created, due to bypassing Congress, central bank of the US. Income tax was also created illegally to cover the huge amounts of money the government has to pay the Federal Reserve. And as another side note, the only people opposing the Fed with enough money to actually be a threat to its creation conveniently went down with the Titanic. Another coincidence, perhaps? Well, the Titanic was owned by the White Star Line, cruise line, I think, which was owned by JP Morgan. So if you know about him, then you might already have come to a conclusion about that. Anyway, continuing on, all central banks around the world are privately owned, including the IMF, World Bank, and are owned by some of the wealthiest, most influential families around the world, including the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers. At the time of the Fed's creation, 1 year before World War I in 1913, there were around 21,000 banks not under the control of it, until from 1914 to 1919, when the Fed doubled the money supply, causing an increase in lending nationwide. Then in 1920, it shrank the money supply, bankrupting 5,500 banks that were then able to be bought up by the Fed for pittance. The Fed then increased the money supply between 1921 and 1929, causing another nationwide increase in lending. But on October 23, 1929, 2.6 million shares were sold by the Fed, and the next day Wall Street was closed at 9 p.m. Loans were called in, forcing investors to sell their shares at low prices, known in history as the Wall Street crash, the event which bankrupted not just the US but the rest of the world too. So basically, it was repeated, the Fed repeated what Nathan Rothschild had done at the Battle of Waterloo. Another 16,000 non-Fed banks went bankrupt and were also bought up for pittance by the Fed. Then they further reduced the money supply by 30%, causing starvation all through America in the start of the Great Depression. The same year, in the UK, the legislation was changed so that pounds of sterling, silver or gold were no longer given in exchange for pound notes, and all the gold and silver were ordered to be handed in to the banks, as far as I can tell, with the excuse of getting out of the Depression. Then in 1933, America followed suit, since its law is based on English law, and it too carried out a national gold seizure when President Roosevelt signed Executive Order 6102 for this, non-compliance of which carried a 10-year prison sentence. The Fed also called in all international loans, and one of the worst countries affected was Germany. They had to pay reparations to the victims of World War I and desperately needed loans for this and for the rebuilding of the country and the economy, already desiccated by the war. So this pushed them into deep depression, leading to the rise of Adolf Hitler, financed by the Fed and the Rothschilds, who also, by the way, controlled the IMF, the WHO, World Health Organization, financed IBM's concentration camp numbering system, IBM computers that is, of course, and had equities in Exxon and also in IG Farben, the producers of Zyklon B gas. So hopefully you can see by this that they once again stood to profit from World War I. It's also interesting to note, as I write this section, on the 8th of Jan 2021, that the first act Hitler passed on his rise to power was called the Emergency Act, and a few days ago Boris Johnson, our fearless leader, passed an emergency coronavirus act, with police literally finding people who are on the street without a reasonable excuse. And you'll see the fine they gave me. Got a funny story about that. You'll see that later, as I showed you a snippet of in the previous video. But the point I was getting to is that countries around the world became bankrupt after the Wall Street crash, and this changed the way the governments around the world operate, as we now use Admiralty law, or what they call the law merchant, or international Admiralty maritime commercial mercantile contract law. Mercantile law was already international. It had to be because it governs the trade of merchants. Also, because when a company becomes bankrupt, it is put in control of its creditor. I think that's called receivership, but basically it's a Chapter 11 bankruptcy, or creditor in possession. All the assets and books, ledgers, are handed over, and any incomings are given to the creditor. So basically this country is controlled by the merchant bankers, pun intended. That is that it is in debt due to the king borrowing money from Nathan Rothschild, as outlined earlier. But America followed very soon after, and then, as detailed by the economic hitman in the video below, most of the world also fell to this and other rich family schemes, and so followed suit. And the name of the video is John Perkins, Confessions of an Economic Hitman. I do recommend watching this video for an outline of current economic policy of America, is the way he puts it, basically. Now, if you look on Companies House, you will see that United Kingdom is registered there as a company. Not that it proves anything, but remember what I said about writing in all capitals. This company has a similar name to the country, the United Kingdom, except it is not physical, it is just a territory on a map. And anyone living there is presumed to be an employee of the all capitalized style United Kingdom. Or I would say actually that is probably England, Scotland and Wales rather than the United Kingdom are the United Kingdom being the corporation, and the three countries that I mentioned being countries. There are lots of other words in legal dictionaries which are very interesting because they further illustrate this. I'll share some later. Companies have employees who are governed by corporate legal policy, not to be confused with law during work hours, and officers such as Chief Executive Officer, MD, CEO, etc. Then we have policy enforcement officers, or police for short. But the assumption that you are an employee of a corporation is just one of the many layers of the legal system, as there are a few types of law. I did touch on this in the previous video though. Many types of law, of which legal policy is one of the lowest forms, which is why they need many layers to control and confuse us with. For instance, a statute is not a law but is given the force of law by your consent. This doesn't mean you have to verbally agree with it. There are many layers and contracts in place that demonstrate our consent and agreement. Then we have this video. Theresa May explains that UK citizens are policed by consent. Consent can be achieved through your silence, your actions, or your words. It doesn't require a positive affirmation from you like assent does. A statute or act is defined as a legislative rule of society which has the force of law, and a society is a number of people joined by mutual consent to deliberate, determine, and act for a common goal. In other words, statutes stroke acts are only given the force of law over those who have consented to be a member of the society those rules govern, whether by action or inaction. Now, I'm in no way suggesting that people go around ignoring or disregarding statutes or rules just because you've learned this meaning, because lots of these rules are there for safety reasons, and I'm not legally qualified to give anyone any legal advice anyway. I'm just showing you there's more to this than we've been told or are aware of. I actually advocate that people act responsibly and honourably. That's the only way to get anywhere with this knowledge anyway. In fact, it's a requirement, because the real law is do no harm and to make all parties whole, meaning come to win-win situations. In fact, a public court can't get involved unless there's a disagreement. No controversy equals no case. That's why things should be settled in the private first, as it says in Matthew 5:25, the King James Bible. Agree with thine adversary quickly whilst thou art in the way with him, lest at any time the adversary deliver thee to the judge, and the judge deliver thee to the officer, and thou be cast into prison. Also, if you look at most of these statutes of legislation, they always use the word must do or not do something or other. Then when you look up the meaning of must in the legal dictionary, you'll find the meaning in legalese is may. Must is synonymous with may, so it is not against the law to do or not to do that thing. It's actually our choice to do or not to do that thing, because we are governed by consent, remember? So unless it is causing someone damage, loss or harm, or is fraud or breaching the peace, then there is no crime. The British Attorney Register, the Bar. The Bar is a private organisation set up in London and has spread to most of the world, where you need to be registered with this organisation to have a legal qualification such as lawyer, solicitor, attorney, barrister, etc. When you register with them, you are bound by their rules. So obviously, if you don't register, you aren't bound by the rules. But the error is that most people make the presumption that all are bound by these rules, but members of the bar or anyone trained to operate under statute, stroke legislation, etc. for that matter, also speak in legalese, and we presume they're speaking in English and that we understand what they are saying when we don't. For example, understand means to stand under or be bound by the rules. That's why when a policeman asks you, do you understand, saying yes means you consent. Then there is the word must, as explained already above. Different types of law in different countries. USA, no state shall enter into any treaty, alliance, or confederation, grant letters of marque and reprisal, coin money, emit bills of credit, make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts, pass any bill of attainder, ex post facto law, or law impairing the obligation of contracts, or grant any title of nobility. And that's from the US Constitution, Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1. This, of course, was before the creation of the 14th Amendment and 14th Amendment citizens, along with it, citizens with a small c. France, agreements legally entered into have the effect of laws on those who make them. So basically, it's a contract, or, well, French Civil Code, aka Napoleonic military law, which is more like Admiralty law, which seems to me to be how we see things operate in a Hollywood film called An Officer and a Gentleman, starring Jack Nicholson and Tom Cruise. The Philippines, obligations arising from contract have the force of law between the contracting parties and should be complied with in good faith. Article 1159 Civil Code, and there's a case example there. Case number. So basically similar to how the UK is run, with the way consent is given or not given. If you've read this far and want to learn more, head over to the next page for a little on how the money system works. You can also skip to the contacts page to send me an email for a free info pack, which will really help build your foundation for when you start actually putting it into practice. Otherwise, let's continue our journey through the system. Let's head over to page 2. So we're near the bottom of this page now. This is just the finishing comments now, and I'll be doing a video on that next page, page 2, how money works, soon as well. So with the finishing comments of the page, it says, with all this COVID going around, it's important to strengthen our immune system. So I've put a website together to help make people more aware of health, and there's a link there, that button, which takes you to this website. I've also got a newsletter you can subscribe to, and I'll be doing a video on that site soon too. And then we're nearly at the bottom of the page. There's another t-shirt there with a play on the words of the announcement that I'm sure we're all too familiar with. And in fact, if you click here, that will take you to this site here. It says, welcome to martial law's merch store. It is hereby decreed under martial law that you buy something from this store. Right, if you scroll down, you can see some other t-shirts there. So getting back to the end of my first page, you'll see it says, if you found this website helpful, please consider making a donation, PayPal or in Bitcoin. By the way, that is LNTX bot. That stands for Lightning Transaction Bot, and is found on Telegram. It's a wallet on Telegram. It stores your cryptocurrency there. I've got an Odyssey channel, but I haven't got much content on there. But my Telegram group is very active, and you can join that. And then that's it. We've got the same banner here for earning pre-coins from pre-search. You can link that up to whatever search engine you use, whether that's Google, DuckDuckGo, or whatever. But anyway, that's the end of this first page of my website. And the next page of the website is entitled Money, or How Money Works, and I'll be doing a video on that next. So thanks for watching. One love, take care and stay blessed.